help myself. I was in love on a level you'd never known, Kane.
Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and murderous vampires trying to suck the soul out of ya. I'm Noah Hook, and today we're looking at Lifeforce. This 1985 sci-fi alien vampire zombie possession horror film from Britain begins when a group of astronauts encounter an alien ship and 3 unconscious humanoid beings are brought back to Earth. One of the extraterrestrials, who appears to be the most beautiful woman in the world, wakes up and starts sucking the life force out of anybody she can get her hands on. This turns the city of London into a war zone as her victims become undead soul suckers as well, and the only surviving astronaut partners with a government agent to stop the ruthless alien presence. Lifeforce was directed by Tobe Hooper during his time between Texas Chainsaws 1 and 2, actually right in between Poltergeist and Invaders from Mars. He collaborated on the screenplay with Dan O'Bannon of Alien and Return of the Living Dead, as well as Don Jacoby of Arachnophobia and Vampires. The story was based on Colin Wilson's 1976 novel The Space Vampires, which was heavily inspired by the various incubus and succubus figures in the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. The actual screenplay seemed to be one of the biggest hurdles for production, with multiple other writers having to come in to create rewrites. Lifeforce has a large cast filled with genre legends. The film stars Steve Railsback from Helter Skelter as Colonel Tom Carlson, Peter Firth from Spooks as Colonel Colin Klain, Frank Finley from Othello as Dr. Hans Fallada, and of course Matilda May from The Jackal as Space Girl. Cinematography was handled by Alan Hume of A Fish Called Wanda and Return of the Jedi, and the score was composed by Henry Mancini of Breakfast at Tiffany's and Creature from the Black Lagoon. It also features the effects of John Dykstra from Star Wars, Spider-Man, and Batman and Robin, as well as Nick Maley from Superman, The Keep, and The Empire Strikes Back. Goddamn, Star Wars people are all over this film, which I guess makes sense when you think about the plot, and all of their skills definitely help add to the grandiose setting that is this film. But that's not to say Lifeforce is without its flaws. It failed to make back even half of its $25 million budget, and it was a big flop with critics as well. Many found it too silly and hard to follow, and I can at least partially agree with that. There is always a lot going on in the plot, and it involves a lot of bouncing around from many locations with lots of different characters, and the story is absolutely batshit crazy, and it's a bit hard to take seriously. It currently has a 58 and 46% on Rotten Tomatoes, as well as a 3.2 on Letterboxd, so it seems it's still a bit of a mixed bag today. But I'll be damned if I don't have a blast watching Lifeforce every single time. It's a bit of a mess, but it's a hot mess. It has such a crazy plot and energy to match, and there's just not another film quite like it. Thank you so much to my patron Lee for requesting Lifeforce for me to review. I think we're gonna have some fun today. I hope y'all are ready to see a lot of my logos today, because we're watching Lifeforce. The movie opens in space! A ship called the Space Shuttle Churchill, which is a joint project between the US and Britain, is on its way to study Halley's Comet up close. The Churchill is sporting some brand new system that replicates Earth's gravity, so this way Hooper wouldn't have to replicate zero gravity as much. Work smarter, not harder, kids. The crew detects a giant structure inside the coma of the comet, which is apparently 150 miles long. Colonel Carlson can't pass up this once-in-an-80-year opportunity and tells them to push forward through the scary green haze. They ride along the big ol' shaft and hop out to inspect the derelict ship. The interior is seemingly organic, with the crew describing a tunnel as a giant artery. The main chamber is a bit more gothic, and they discover the corpses of hundreds of giant bat-like creatures. These things have been completely dried out, presumably due to centuries of being in space. There's another reason for it, it'll get explained very soon. They bag a creature to take it back with them, but the crew on board the Churchill informs Carlson that the giant dick has just released its giant sack that begins to envelop the ship. A big ol' sphincter opens up to reveal a bright white light, so of course the astronauts head straight inside. Here they find 3 very naked humanoid bodies in suspended animation. Carlson is completely mesmerized by the beautiful woman.
Something's happening to me. What's wrong with me?
As are the other men in the crew.
I'd say she's perfect. I've been in space for 6 months, and she looks perfect to me.
They opt to bring all 3 humanoids back to Earth, but 30 days later, the ship loses contact with Mission Control in Britain. They discover the Churchill floating in orbit and send a rescue mission to check on it, but they discover that the interior of the ship and everyone inside has been burnt to a crisp. Everyone except those sexy naked aliens, that is. The humanoids are brought to the European Space Research Centre in London, where some top military executives discuss how the mysterious clear cases opened on their own when they reached Earth. The scientists can't identify what these cases are made of, and they aren't even sure if the aliens are dead or not. Dr. Bukovsky, one of the important fellas in that meeting, watches as national news questions the fate of the Churchill crew, and some scientists prepare the female humanoid for an autopsy. But one young guard can't help but get a closer look while she's unattended. She wakes up before the creep can get handsy, but hey, she seems very happy to see him. Bukovsky notices this on a security cam and rushes over, and the female alien, who I'm just gonna call Space Girl from now on, goes in for a smooch. Space Girl's got that intergalactic tongue action though, so by the time Bukovsky gets there, the guard has been reduced to a husk. He's next on Space Girl's grocery list, which Dr. Falada witnesses in Bukovsky's office. He's at least smart enough to bring backup, but for some reason she left Bukovsky alive. She starts wandering the halls of the facility, making light work of the dumbass security guards with some kind of energy blasts. She blows out the glass wall and gets a move on. Bye! Enter Colonel Kane from the Special Air Service, who has been sent to investigate this sexy slayer that's been let loose in London. Bukovsky explains that the woman had some incredible sexual control over him.
It was the most overwhelmingly feminine presence I've ever encountered.
And she also spoke to him in English, saying, "Use my body." They wonder how she could know their language, and the scientists also reveal that the Churchill's escape pod was missing, so there may be a survivor out there. Falada explains that the cases they arrived in are actually some kind of force field, and this feeds into his own theory about life after death. He believes that all life is composed of some kind of life force that persists even after our bodies perish, and the Space Girl is able to harvest it from other creatures like a vampire.
That girl was no girl. She was totally alien to this planet and our life form.
Next, the 2 male aliens wake up in an explosive fashion. A pair of soldiers start blasting to no avail, but a couple grenades effectively blow them to bits. This presumably saves some lives, but also prevents any kind of autopsy, so all they can inspect at the moment is the one dead guard. Oh, scratch that, that poor fucker ain't dead yet. He reaches out to the doctors in agony, but when one makes the mistake of getting too close, he begins sucking the life force right out of him. He completely drains the life out of this man, which restores the young man back to his original state. His joy quickly turns to terror as he realizes what he's done, and the soldiers sedate him and put him in an isolation cell. Falada and Kane plan to isolate this new body in case it reanimates as well, along with what is left of the original 2 males just to be safe. They soon get a call about a woman who got her soul sucked by Space Girl in a park. Now the alien has clothes and will be a lot harder to track down. And a mere 2 hours after being detained, the vampire security guard shrivels up and dies due to a lack of energy. These vampire alien zombies need to absorb life force on a frequent basis to live, otherwise they will completely dry out and turn to dust. The same thing happens to the other doctor, and it will soon happen to the woman from the park. They strap her up to a bunch of machines to observe her reanimation process, which involves so much energy that it short circuits the heart monitor. The time between reanimation and death without an energy source to steal is incredibly short, as she bursts into dust just a minute after waking. The boys get notified that the Churchill's escape pod has just landed in Texas. I see you, Tobe. Where Colonel Carlson is found alive. They fly him out ASAP to learn where these space vampires came from, sharing what's taken place in London thus far. He explains that they found a ship hanging out on Halley's Comet and took the 3 humanoid creatures and a petrified giant bat, but one by one the crew began feeling drained on their way back. This of course resulted in them shriveling up and dying, and eventually Carlson was the only one left. He argues that he survived through the sheer will to live. He knew he couldn't bring this evil back to Earth and set the ship up to explode, exiting on the escape pod after setting the bodies on fire. Carlson says that leaving her behind was the hardest thing he's ever done, as he also felt that extreme sexual control over him. The boys receive word that the alien ship has left Halley's Comet and will arrive at Earth in just 2 days. Uh-oh. That night, Carlson is psychically visited by the space girl, who very easily seduces him before draining him of some energy. He's certain the two have some kind of psychic connection she's using to routinely siphon energy from him, and he agrees to let Falada hypnotize him so they can further analyze this.
I feel as if my mind is not entirely my own.
He feels her watching him, but discovers the ability to watch her as well. She's taken over the body of another woman and is on the hunt for a man to seduce. She doesn't want to kill him, only take enough energy to survive a while longer. To be clear, she hasn't shape-shifted, she is controlling this woman psychically. Her real body is hiding somewhere. She finds some poor bastard working on his car and successfully hitches a ride and seduces the bloke, and Carlson reads off the man's license plate so they can track them down. They observe the vampire ship as it passes by the moon, and they learn Space Girl is disguised as a nurse at a psychiatric hospital for the criminally insane. Meanwhile, it seems those male vampires aren't dead after all, and one of them pays a visit to Falada. The boys fly to Thurlstone Hospital, where they are greeted by its director, Dr. Armstrong. Carlson and Kane meet with Ellen in the nurse's housing, and she cautiously allows them inside. Carlson immediately starts roughing her up to coax out the alien, but realizes the creature has entered someone else's body. Ellen refuses to give away that info for free, and apparently Carlson's psychic connection still applies to this woman, so somehow he knows Ellen is a masochist and wants him to abuse her? Okay. So he beats her up some more until she's all riled up, which allows him to get a physical description of the new alien host. He describes one of the patients to Armstrong, who identifies the description as Jeffrey Sykes, a child murderer. The doctor is confused but gives the men permission to hypnotize him to coax out any information they can. But the tables turn when the boys inject the doctor with morphine, as it's actually Armstrong who's been taken over by the creature. Patrick Stewart auditions for his most iconic character, and Carlson reveals that he can sense the girl through touch if she is present inside somebody else. The morphine has prevented her from escaping Armstrong's body, so they plan to give him a double dose, but in the meantime they try to get through to the doctor. He says she won't let him talk to the group and begins writhing in pain. The woman's voice emerges and says there's no need for a second dose.
There's no need for that. No need.
So they wisely inject him again. She tells Carlson that she loves him and wants to be with him, and he asks why she's so perfect and human.
Our bodies are unimportant. We change them for you.
Space Girl reveals that their true bodies are unimportant. Their human facades were simply created to please the crew of the Churchill when they approached. She pulled this look straight out of Carlson's most vivid imagination. Man's got good taste. He begs her to let him go, and it seems she's gained enough power to start doing some Carrie type shit. She seems to exit Armstrong's body, and their homie Percy gets his neck broken in the chaos. Carlson also intuitively knows that they didn't find all of her victims, so the zombie vampire virus thing has spread throughout London in their absence. On the way back, they get a call from Falada, who shares that the 2 male vampires did not actually die. They spiritually hopped into the bodies of the soldiers who blew them up, shape-shifting their forms back to their sexy space looks. So this means they may actually have Space Girl in disguise, and Falada says he managed to kill one of the males for good. Apparently back in the old days, you had to stab them in the energy center 2 inches below the heart, specifically with a leaded iron metal blade. He believes the vampires of legend were based on these very creatures, which would visit Earth every 80 years when Halley's Comet passed. The other male has escaped and is roaming the streets of London, so they still have some work to do. All of a sudden, Armstrong and Percy start spewing blood, and the coagulation takes the form of Space Girl. This means she is back inside her own body, which Carlson can sense in London. Kane knows there's more to this story than he's leading on, and Carlson admits that he was the one who destroyed the ship's tapes and radio, which he previously blamed on another astronaut. Turns out he opened the case while they were on the ship, saying she was spiritually calling out for him to join her. She allowed him to pass through the force field, and they swapped both spit and energy, as she for some reason decided not to swallow him whole. He doesn't know why she chose him, but knows she has the power to destroy entire worlds. London has become a war zone due to the outbreak, with thousands of energy vampires running around killing and creating new ones. Carlson and Kane are summoned by the Prime Minister, but when the frantic world leader pauses to bring his assistant into his office, it becomes clear that even he's been taken over. Yeah, best time we get the fuck out of here. A couple zombies hop onto the chopper for a little joyride, but the boys send them plummeting back down below. London has been placed under a martial law and NATO command, so the pilot is forced to land at the nearest military stronghold. London has been completely isolated to stop the plague from spreading, but if that fails, the military has been approved to nuke the entire city. The alien ship has parked itself in Earth's orbit directly above London. That giant pillar of light is all the human souls being sucked away from the ship. The male vampire is collecting as much energy as possible and transferring it to her, and she sends it up to the ship. He feels her calling out to him as she needs the part of herself she gave him back. Carlson hijacks a vehicle and heads out to find her, and the lieutenant allows Kane to pursue him. Space Girl beckons Carlson all the way to St. Paul's Cathedral, but first he has to get through a horde of zombies. Damn, 28 days later, who? Kane has taken a detour to find Falada, but he's looking like he could use a 5-hour energy. He does inform Kane that the girl has been in the cathedral since she escaped, and he is very excited to see what the afterlife is truly like.
Here I go.
Kane yoinks the magic blade and gets a move on. Carlson finds his baddie soaking up that soul light, and she invites him to join her in the stars.
'Twas always intended you should find us and bring us to Earth.
She claims it's destiny that brought them together. Meanwhile, poor fucking Kane is getting his cardio in trying to outrun these zombies. The male vampire has transformed into a big ball of light and is sucking up the energy left and right, and he intercepts Kane as he arrives at the cathedral.
It'll be much less terrifying if you just come to me.
He doesn't know every bloke in London carries a shiv though, so my boy Kane walks that sucker down. The vamp does transform into the horrifying real form momentarily before blowing the fuck up. He finds Carlson absolutely lost in the sauce down in the mausoleum.
Why do I feel so close to you? Need you?
Because you're one of us.
But the love-drunk astronaut manages to get his wits about him and catch the blade as Kane drops it down. He impales Space Girl through the back, also stabbing himself in the process. They both dissolve into energy and get sucked up by the ship. The movie ends as Kane looks up to the stars and the alien vampire ship heads back to Halley's Comet. And that's Lifeforce. You know what? This movie gets more and more fun to watch every single time. It just has so much to offer, especially as genres go. You've got sci-fi, alien, outer space exploration and cool-ass ships and energy blasts. You've got the sexy vampire seduction angle. You've got hordes of zombies and some crazy gore. And you've even got some possession and what might as well be an exorcism. It has romance, a bit of comedy, atmospheric horror, body horror, contemplative moments about life, death, and the afterlife, and lots of boobs. I mean, really, what's not to like? It genuinely has a little bit of something for everybody. Obviously, a lot of this is coming from the original source material, but it's also so cool to see Hooper synthesize these many different types of horror. The fact that this film tackles so much and doesn't feel totally jumbled or hard to follow is super impressive. Matilda May does a fantastic job in the role of Space Girl. I do feel like some people try to reduce her performance down to simply being eye candy, but that just simply is not the case. She seamlessly and subtly shifts her facial expressions from intoxicating to terrifying. She has genuinely no empathy and no remorse for anything she's doing. She's joyfully smiling while killing thousands of life forms. She just gives a fantastic performance throughout. I'm also super curious about how the three aliens ended up in that station. Was it a communal choice by the species of bat monsters to save three of themselves? Did these three go rogue and kill their brethren? They seem to require a near constant stream of victims to survive, so it makes sense that they live on a ship and travel the solar system looking for energy, and using a comet as an efficient way to get around and stay hidden is such a cool concept. A lot of mid-80s horror films utilize certain visual effects that really don't hold up, and that at least partially applies to Lifeforce as well. But I think it also goes for them to such an extreme that it adds so much style to the film in a way that's almost mesmerizing. It's such a visually busy film that it can be hard to find places to rest your eyes throughout. It is a very active and engaged kind of a watch for sure. I will say that the middle part of the film is the slowest and my least favorite though. The psychic possession component is the least interesting part to me. I feel like we spend a bit too much time at this random psychiatric hospital, and this part of the film introduces a ton of characters that ultimately aren't important, but make it a bit hard to keep track of who is who. It is very fun to see a young Patrick Stewart going bananas though. I do have to say that Carlson is probably one of the weaker components of the film. Railsback just feels a bit too restrained and wooden. I think his character or actor wasn't given enough room to get weird with it. I've seen some reviews that are very critical, or at least very skeptical of all the nudity that was required for Matilda May, and I can at least understand and agree to an extent. I actually think the film needed more sexiness and horniness and nudity from other characters in the film. We either needed Carlston or the male vampires to hang some dong. But people who aren't super familiar with Hooper don't always know that he is really big into satire. I just discussed it in my review of Texas Chainsaw 2, but that entire film is basically a parody of his own work that throws in the explosive, horny excess that Hollywood was pumping into horror at the time. His earliest films were genuine, low-budget, seedy, grimy endeavors like Eaten Alive, and he is bringing some of those qualities over to a very different genre and level of production. Space Girl straight up says that she was created by Carlston's own perverted fantasies, so basically any straight guy that's watching her on screen is basically guilty of also objectifying and fantasizing her as well. It acknowledges, rewards, and condemns our voyeurism at the same time, so at least for me it adds a level of criticality to the dozen stupid men who stare her down throughout the film. It's a trap, and a very well laid one at that. It's basically just a visual essay about how dumb men are and how far they will go to get that nut. All in all though, I really love Lifeforce. It's a really fun mishmash of a bunch of different horror genres. It pays a lot of homage to classic sci-fi films. It has some really great visual and practical effects on display, and whether or not you consider it a dumb popcorn flick or agree that it has some more social commentary and critique mixed in, you really can't deny that it's a fun-ass movie. Sure, it has some writing, pacing, and acting issues from time to time, but I can personally overlook them most of the time thanks to the sheer absurdity of everything happening on screen. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. At least here in the States, it's free on Tobe, so go give it a watch. Well, that's about it. Thank you so much to my patron Lee for requesting Lifeforce for me to review. This was a really fun film to revisit and just write a review of. It's got such a funny plot. Just typing out some of those sentences was insane. But what do y'all think of Lifeforce? Be sure to let me know down in the comments below. And be sure to join me in 2 weeks as we check out the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 4: The Next Generation. Please keep me in your thoughts and prayers and considerations this week while I write this script. Thank you all for joining me, and an extra thank you to my patrons. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and thanks for watching Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching my review of Lifeforce. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all my horror reviews. And if you want to help support the channel further, you should check out my Patreon account. You'll be able to vote for future movies and franchises I cover on the channel. Thanks, y'all.